Hello, badasses! Welcome to my enemy AI tutorial with the animator in Unity. Today, we will be creating an animator that can both patrol and chase the player. Let's get started. To create our enemy, I'm going to create an empty game object and call it enemy container. You'll see why in a minute. I'm going to move this transform into about where I think it would be a good place for our enemy to be placed. I've added in a new object with the sprite renderer called squash enemy. I'm going to parent it to my enemy container and reset the transform on this to 0, 0, 0 for the position. Now it's right in my enemy container. The squash is in the game, but he doesn't do anything. So I'm going to add a few objects to add behavior. I'm going to add an animator. I'm going to add a box collider 2D. I'm going to edit this collider so it fits the shape of the enemy more closely. I'm also going to make it trigger. I'll add a rigid body 2D for later use. I'm going to make sure that freeze rotation is set on for the Z-axis. And it's time to enter the animator for a squash enemy. Nothing shows up right now, and this is my player's animator. To get a new animation clip for the squash enemy, we need to create a new animation file. And now that we've created it, we can go to our squash enemy and we see a state called new animation. I'm going to rename this state to patrol, and I'm going to show you two types of patrol behaviors we can add. We have patrol area and patrol path behavior. First, I'll go over patrol area behavior. Patrol area behavior will have the enemy patrol randomly within a radius, so like a circle. We can set the speed of the enemy here. I'll set it equal to 10 so that we can see it in action very quickly. And start wait time is how long the enemy will wait once it reaches the end of its patrol line. I'm going to set this to 0.25 and you'll see the motion very quickly. I'm going to set the radius as something small like 2. Now when we press play, we can see that I forgot one very important thing. When you add a rigid body, make sure the gravity scale is set to 0. Okay, now we look at our enemy, and our enemy is navigating around this random area, and it makes our enemy look very complex. You never know where he's going to go, just like a real sentient squash. Now let's say you wanted your enemy to be a little bit more predictable in the manner in which it patrols. In which case, go to your patrol state on your enemy, and you want to add a behavior, and this is called patrol path behavior. Now, in order to set this up, we need to go back to our scene view, back to our enemy container, and we need to create an empty. The empty must be named exactly paths with a capital P and an S. If you don't name it this exact name, the script just will not work. Okay, to our paths, we will create an empty. We will call it path 0. We can select an icon for this empty so that this empty is visible in the scene view of our editor. The path should be right on top of wherever your enemy is. This is where your enemy will start to approach in its patrol route. We can Control D or Command D to duplicate this path, and we can move it to about here. Our enemy now will go between these two paths. Additionally, I have created a script to make this a little bit easier to debug. I added a script called draw transform lines that for any empty, it will look at all of its children and draw lines between them. So if we add this script right here, draw transform lines, we'll notice in the editor that there is now a line between path 0 and path 1. We can duplicate this, and we have path 2 over here. Blue lines will be drawn from each path to the next path, 0 to 1, 1 to 2. The red line is always drawn from the last path to the first path. So path 2, the path 0, or if we were to make a path 3, it would be drawn from path 3 to path 0. What does it mean? If we go to our animator and go to patrol, there are two manners in which we can go along this path. I'm going to set the speed to something fast like 10 so we can see what the squash does more quickly. There is a variable called isLoop, and that's the only one that's really important for right now. If we press play, we can see all of our paths have loaded in and that the squash always knows the next path that it's going to go to. If isLoop is false, our squash will only go along the blue line. If we set isLoop to true, our squash will travel across the blue line and then across the red line. This opens up the possibility for many complex pathing scenarios with your enemy. Now, some of you may want your enemy to do something more, like chase a player. Do not worry, we can create an empty state, and we can call it chase. We can make transitions, make sure has exit time is unchecked, and we can add a behavior for our chase behavior. We'll set the speed to something more manageable, like 1 instead of 10, and I'm also going to change the speeds on our patrol path behaviors to 1 as well. We need a sort of controller to set these animator variables. If we go to our enemy, we can add a script called EnemyAnim and EnemyAnim sets a variable called distance, which represents the distance between the player and the enemy. Additionally, if the enemy is not rendered, meaning it's not visible in the main camera or the scene camera in the editor, and its distance is greater than a variable called respawn radius, which is how far the enemy is willing to travel before it just respawns in its original area, then the distance will just be set to -1, meaning that the enemy is very far away. Using how this is set up, we have a really easy job ahead of us. First, let's add a float called distance. This will allow EnemyAnim to set this float. We will add two conditions here. One is distance is greater than 0 and less than however far you think your enemy should be able to see. I'm going to set mine to 5 because that is what works for me. And on the other way, to go from your chase behavior to the patrol, you can just have distance is less than 0 because when your enemy is sufficiently far away, distance will be automatically set to -1. If we go to our squash enemy, we can set this distance that will make it that the enemy is willing to give up to as something like 10. I generally recommend about double what your distance is when going from patrol to chase. Mine was 5, I set it to 10 there. Okay, another very important thing, the enemy will not give up or respawn if you have the scene tab open and your enemy is visible, or if the enemy is on screen with the player. Now if we press play, we'll notice that the enemy will now start to chase us, but when we move sufficiently far away, he'll give up and go back to his patrol routine. As it is now, our enemy has no collision behavior, meaning it, like a Spectre or Ghost, it will just float through objects. For some games, this is what you want. For other games, you might want your enemy to have some sort of collision. We can simply go to our squash enemy. We can add a circle or capsule collider or just another box collider. Make sure it's not set to his trigger. And we want to make sure that this collider is smaller than the trigger on our enemy that we had before. Additionally, if you have some sort of combat behavior set up, you would want to add your health or whatever on your enemy can be damaged, such as your health script, and you'll want to make sure that your enemy is tagged enemy for that to work. When I attack the enemy, it will take damage, and its health script And now, if I go behind an object, the enemy will get stuck when he tries to chase me. The enemy has some logic in it to try and get it unstuck from objects, but you can think of our enemy AI as intentionally stupid in order to keep our games lightweight and easy to debug. I haven't really added any pathing. However, if this is something you think would benefit your game, feel free to look up libraries like A-Star or Braggie's tutorials on EnemyAI pathing in 2D. That about wraps it up for today. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and I can't wait to see your games.